What's up, everybody? Welcome back. So, in the last episode, I mentioned we were going to work on the combat. That's kind of true, but before we do that, we need to actually set up the weapons for the AI so they can shoot at us. So, that's what we're gonna do first. And over here, I have my working project so I can show you what we're gonna end up with. So, this guy is going to start firing at me automatically, and he will only actually start shooting if he's in combat. So, that's what he's doing now. And he has a burst rifle that's using traces. So as you can see, we have tracing going on. And we're actually using overlap traces, so we can also set up bullet penetration, for example. And we can just simply select the weapon that the AI is going to use over here in the details panel. And we have a bunch of options as well. So for example, I could go into my shotgun and then change it from a trace to a projectile weapon. And I actually have a bullet projectile set up over here. And then if we go back into the level, oh, this is my shotgun, I'm sorry. So then I need to change the shotgun over here as well, but we can do the same thing with the rifle if we want to. And then if we click play and the AI starts shooting, then all of a sudden he's using a trace weapon, and again for the a projectile weapon, and for the projectiles we can also set up bullet penetration if we want to. So we're gonna set that up with overlapping projectiles, and so I can show you. If I go back into the shotgun and set it to trace, then it will use a trace instead. There we go. So that's what we're going to do, and then we're also able to set up things like a rocket launcher, for example. So let me show you how that's going to look. And there we have that. So that's pretty much the setup, and we will be able to just change everything inside of the primary data asset and then simply create a weapon in here, assign it to the AI, and it should work. So that's what we're gonna do in, well, probably not only today's episode. It will probably take about 2, maybe even 3 episodes to get all of this set up. So let's get into it. So before we continue with the weapons, there's 2 small things I want to mention about the previous episode. So if I go into the level over here and I shoot at an AI and he takes damage, he will still alert all the AI in the level. So I forgot about that one, and we actually want to change that so it matches up the behavior with the other behavior. So it will only alert AI in the same room and only AI in the correct radius. So that's what we're going to do first. We need to go into the behavior folder and open the controller, the AI controller interface, I'm sorry. And in here for the AI change state function, we want to add an extra input in here. So we're going to add a new boolean and call this one alert other AI. So we can actually tell if we want to alert other AI if we call this function on spawn. So with that changed, we need to go into the actual controller this time. So the AI controller. And in here, we added a new input. So we want to go to the BPI change state event over here. And we're simply going to add a branch in between. So we're going to check if we, we're going to add a branch right behind here. So this actually changes the state of the AI we call this function or event on. And over here, after we changed our own state, we want to make sure if we alert other AI or not. And if we do, we're going to call our alert other AI and simply hook things up. That was a bit weird. So we can grab the inputs from the event over here. So the new state, the spotted actor, the search location, and for my location we can get the possessed pawn's actor location. So we're going to drag in the possessed pawn and then get the actor location, and that's my location. And for the alert radius, we have a variable, so we can simply plug that in over here. So now it will alert only AI in the correct radius and in the same room. So over here, if I fire at this guy, oh no, it doesn't, because, okay, I'm screwing up. We need to go into the guard right now, and over here where we take damage, so that's in the event point damage event, we call the event on the game mode, and this will actually trigger the combat for all AI in the level. So over here we simply want to call our interface function. So we're gonna get our AI controller first, get AI controller, and we need to hook up an actor over here, so that's simply a reference to ourselves. And then we can use our interface, so that's BPI AI change state, the message function, and we simply want to call this one instead. So we're not going to call the game mode event anymore. And over here, we're going to set the state to combat. And then for the spotted actor, we want to hook that up as well. So we can hook it up to the actual event. So we can go all the way to the beginning. And over here, we have the instigated by, let me double check quickly. No, the damage causer, I'm sorry. So the instigated by is the controller, and the damage causer is the actual actor. So this is the player's character. Yeah, the player's character, and this is the player controller. And then we want to make sure we enable the boolean, so we're going to alert other AI as well. So we can get rid of this one, and now it should work. So now if I hit play and fire at this guy, he will not alert that guy because he's in another room. And over here, he's probably inside of the radius. So if I lower the radius for the alert over here to 1000, for example, then it should not alert the guy over there. So there we go. He's still white, and the other ones are alerted. So that's better. That's matching up with the other behavior that we have set up. And now we do have kind of an issue, I think, if we have the AI go into combat, for example. So let them see us. They will come to us. And then I think... I'm not really sure what's triggering it, but there is a point where we can actually get a search bar above the AI while they are in combat state, and we want to prevent that because that doesn't really make any sense. So we're going to fix that as well, and that's inside of our AI controller. And over here we want to go to the event graph, and let me grab my notes quickly. So we need to go to the awareness loop, if I'm recalling correctly. No, we need to go to the event update perception. So over here, target perception updated event. And then over here we have the boolean where we check if the actor that we spotted is an AI corpse or not. So if this is false, the actor is a player. And over here we want to add a check to make sure we are not in combat. So we're going to move this over a little bit. And before we add the player to the perceived actors array, we're going to add another branch in here. And then plug in the true pin, and we're going to check our current state. So drag in the current state enumeration, not equal to, and then use the enum one. So we can simply select the combat state over here and plug it in. So we want to add it over there, and we also want to make sure that we go to the chasing player loop. So let's go over here, event graph chasing player loop. So in here, this can make it happen when we are in combat. The player actually gets removed from the perceived successfully array. and that will trigger the searching state over here. So this will make us go into searching state while we are in combat state. So we want to prevent that. So right before we have the get last perceived location, we're going to add the branch as well. And over here, we're also going to check if we're not in the combat state. So hook up the branch. And we're going to grab our current state and simply do a not equal to and select our combat state. There we go. Okay, so that should be taken care of. And now we have those things smoothed out. We can actually kind of start working on the weapons. There's one small thing we want to do before that. So let me explain the last thing that we're going to do. We made our AI use the aim offset by actually aiming with the focus of the AI controller. So we can set focus on the AI controller, and that will make the aim offset point into the direction where the AI is aiming or focusing. And to make sure that we can actually properly test our weapons, we need to make sure that we have an actor in focus while we are in combat. And currently we don't have any logic when we are in a combat state. So what we're going to do is simply add a little shortcut in our combat state to make sure we have an actor in focus. And then once we have all of the weapon stuff set up and everything is working, and we're actually going to start working on the behavior, we can simply get rid of that later. So we want to make sure we have an actor in focus, like I mentioned, and we need to do it inside of the AI controller. We want to go to the start combat state event. So let's go there first. Combat state. And in here, we want to add the spotted actor to the event as an input. So we're going to add one input, and that's the spotted actor. And that's simply an actor reference. And then right after we set the enum over here, we're going to set the focus to that actor. So let's make a little room. And first of all, we're going to set it on our blackboard as well. So we want to make sure that we have it accessible from there. So we can copy the notes. Excuse me. We can copy the notes from the start chasing state event, for example, the set value as object spotted actor. So let's copy that one, go back to start combat state, paste it over here, and hook up the spotted actor to the event. And after that, we're going to set the focus. So we are the AI controller, so we can simply do set focus. And we want to use this one that actually uses an actor to focus on. Plug it in, and the new focus is the spotted actor as well. So that add a comment around here, temp for testing, for example. And then hook that back up over here. So we have the new input, and we want to hook that up in the change state event as well. So we're going to go to AI change state. And in here, we want to hook up the spotted actor to the start combat state node over here. So that's one pin we need to hook up from the event to start combat state. And we can actually get this out of the way, like so. So that's done. And now there's only one thing left. We need to make sure that for the AI change state nodes where we call it, we actually have the spotted actor hooked up, because currently we don't. So we can simply find the references, for example, and check all of them. So that's simply the event. This goes into the combat state. So let me see, this is inside of the awareness loop. And over here, because we go into combat, we need to hook up the spotted actor. So we can simply grab the array element over here from the for each loop. And we need to do it for the alert AI as well, possibly. Let me double check quickly. Yeah, we also want to hook that one up, so we can simply grab it over here as well, and then hook it up for alert nearby AI as well. And then let's move down the list. So we have another one over here, change state, but this is chasing, so we don't need to worry about that one. This is call to the event. over here we change to combat again. So this time we're in the target perception updated event, and then we are in the hearing branch. We heard gunfire, and that was actually really close, so we're gonna go into combat. So we can grab the spotted actor over here from the event, all the way at the beginning. So that's the actor that we perceived. And we also want to hook that up to the alert nearby AI for the combat state. So plug it in over here as well. So that's another combat node fixed. Then let's look at the next one. This is for searching. This is for chasing. This is for searching. And this is the BPI event. So we already have that one hooked up. So we should be good to go right now. And currently, if we go into combat, we should have focus. Well, I think we can test it just like this. So let's just run in here. So we get close, we trigger combat, and the AI is still focused on us. So they will keep aiming towards us. And that's what we want. And now let me remove all of the other AI from the level. That's just a little bit easier in my opinion. So I'm gonna keep one guard and get rid of the other ones. And also the other guard spots for now. And let me move this guy a little bit closer. There we go. So now something weird happens if we actually make our AI turn really fast and use the 180 turn animation. He will turn and then he will get stuck over here. So that's something we need to take care of as well, and we're gonna fix that one first. And once that's fixed, we're gonna finally start working on the weapons. So the issue with the turn in place animations, let me go inside of the animation blueprint and inside of the event graph. So we have the turn, or this is actually the blueprint update animation event, but this handles the turn in place animations. And over here at the end, when the animation is done, we're gonna set these booleans back to false. And then if a new animation needs to play, we're gonna set them back to true over here, depending if we need to turn left or right. So this is actually working. I've double checked by adding prints, and it's actually turning these back to false like it should. But if we turn too far, it will immediately set them back to true. So that goes too fast for our state machine over here. So we have the state machine, and in here we actually play the turn left and turn right animations. And these animations will not trigger again because it happens too fast. So what we can do, if we go inside of the turning left and turning right state, select these animations and set them to looping. And I'm going to show you how that looks. So both left and right, and then both animations, just simply select looping, compile and save. And then if we go back into the game, then it will actually work. So it will keep playing the animations and do not get stuck. But sometimes, as you can see over there, it can look a little bit choppy and it will actually skip a part like it did over there. So in my opinion, this is not the greatest solution. So I'm gonna set them back to not looping, and also do the same thing in the left state over here. So now we were back to where we were, and the fix that I made over here is simply go to the event graph, and then we're going to add a new variable in here. So let's create a new float and call this our turn animation reset, for example. So like I mentioned, it's going to be a float. Then in the branch where we set turning left and turning right back to false, and then also reset our yaw delta, at the end we're going to set our turn animation reset to something like 0.3. So this is 0.3 seconds. And then we're going to go all the way to the beginning. And right before we do anything, So before we even check the booleans for turning left and turning right, we're going to check our current timer reset. So we're going to grab a branch and check if our turn animation reset is greater than 0. So let's do greater than 0, plug it in over here. If that's true, then we're going to subtract delta time. So if it's true, grab a setter and then also grab a getter. We're going to subtract and then grab delta time from the blueprint update animation, set it over here. And if this is false, so if we reached 0 again, then we're going to simply run the animations like we used to. So that should fix it. So right now, if we go in game, then the turn animations will not get stuck and this will look a whole lot better. So now it won't actually skip animations and just, well, jump into place like you saw in the previous episode. So that's a fix for the turn place animations. Finally, we have all of the side stuff done and we're going to start working on the weapons. We started the setup for the weapons in about episode 2, I think. So if you missed that one, make sure to check that out. And in there, we actually set up the component and the primary data asset, the weapon type enum, and some stuff like that. So we have the rifle and the shotgun implemented in here just as mesh. They don't really do anything. But this is the basic setup that we're going to continue working from. So if you missed that episode, make sure to check it out. And if I don't forget, I'll have a link in the top right of the screen over here. So what we want to do now is go to the weapons component that's in the data folder, BP AI weapon component. Let's open it up. We have 2 events in here, begin play and the fire weapon event. So for now, let's just get rid of anything that's inside of our fire weapon event. We're going to get back to that later. And for event begin play, we're going to set this one up first. And we want to get a reference to our owning controller. And we also want to get a reference to the animation instance or the animation blueprint. And we're going to use that to play the fire animations later. So what we are going to do in here, let me clarify the animation instance. We need to have a reference for that on all instances of our AI. So not only on the server, but also on the clients, because otherwise for montages and sounds and FX, things like that, they don't replicate by default. So we need to make sure we actually make them replicate by simply playing them on every instance of the character. And our event begin play, as you can tell by simply adding a print, this will fire on all instances of our character. So currently if I press play, we only have the server. So in the top left you actually saw that the server printed hello. So let me increase the duration over here. So as you can see, top right, server hello. And if we change it to, for example, 3 players and then hit play, then we will see the server print hello. And then as soon as the client spawns, he will also print hello. And if the other client spawns, he will also print hello. So there's one AI and the event begin play triggers for each instance of our character. So we're going to kind of use that. First of all, we're going to get the animation instance reference, as I mentioned, and for that we need to get the owner of this component. So the owner of this component is the guard character, the AI character. So from the owner we want to cast it to a pawn. So from a pawn we can get an animation instance, because a pawn has a character mesh by default. So that's the lowest class that has a character mesh, so that's why we're simply casting to a pawn and not to our AI guard specifically. So we're going to cast to a pawn, hook it up over here, and to make sure that we don't end up with an empty reference, just in case, we're going to grab the cast failed pin and we're going to delay until next tick. So if for some reason this pawn reference returns empty, then we're going to try again next tick. And once that's completed, so once we actually have a reference. Then from our pawn, we're going to drag off and we're going to get components by tag. So components. And then we're going to use the one by tag. The component that we want to get is the skeletal mesh component. So skeletal mesh component. And then we're going to add a tag to that. So we can simply come up with this one. And I've come up with character mesh. So character mesh. And the character should only have one of these components. So we're going to drag off and get a copy and simply get the first index of the array. And then because we have the skeletal mesh reference, from there we can get the animation instance. And the animation instance is the animation blueprint. So that's what we want. And from this we want to get the reference stored in a variable. So we're going to drag off here and promote this to a variable. And that's our animation instance. Like so. So we have this one stored and good to go. And as I mentioned, begin play fires on all instances of the character. So each instance has a reference to the animation instance that we can use. Now we're going to add a branch in here and we're going to check if we are the server or not. No, that's not correct. So is server. And for the server, we want to get the owning controller, so the AI controller. And the AI controller only exists on the server's instance. So if we want to try and do this on the client instances, then we're going to end up with an empty reference we cannot use anyway. So that's why we're adding a isServer branch in here. And later we're also going to add some other logic right behind here. So we want to have those separated. To get the AI controller, we want to get our pawn reference again. Because a pawn again is a class that has a controller. So we're going to drag off the pawn and simply get an AI controller. And that reference, we're going to store that as well. So drag off here, promote to variable, and that's our owning controller. And hook that one up to the true pin, like so. So we could go to event begin play and then toggle the comment bubble and say this fires on all instances. And then we can add a comment in here. So executes on all instances. So each instance also sets the weapon mesh on its own, because that's not something that replicates either. So that goes all the way up to here, and then all of the stuff over here executes only on the server. So executes server only. Okay. Like so. So that's for now our event begin play. We're going to expand that later, but this is a default setup that we need anyway. And there's one thing we need to do. We added the character mesh tag to the skeletal mesh component. So right now it will not find anything because our character mesh does not have that tag. So we're going to go back to our AI guard, the character. And in here we have the mesh, so the character mesh, and that's the skeletal mesh component. And in here for the details panel, we want to go all the way down. And over here we have component tags. So we want to add one tag, and that's the character mesh tag. So the same tag that we entered in the weapon component. And this will make sure that we get the correct component as a reference to get the animation blueprint from over here. So this is pretty important. Make sure you have that one set up on the character mesh. Okay, that's good to go. Now we can go back to our weapon component and we can start setting up the weapon firing. So let's go back to the fire weapon event. And for this, let's add the comment as well. And this is actually only going to fire on server. So we're going to say server only. And we're going to give this one input. And that's going to be AI fire weapon. And we're going to drag off this boolean and we're going to promote it to a variable as well and simply keep that name. That's fine. So AI fire weapon. So this is pretty much a similar bool to what we would do in a player that says fire button pressed. So if we want to fire or not, this is true or false. And then we're going to create a second custom event. So let's create another custom event, and this is going to be called fire weapon loop. So this is the event that will actually keep looping if we are firing. And then over here, we're going to add a branch, plug it in. And if we set this to true, then we want to call our fire weapon loop event. So we're going to plug that one in over here. And if we set it to false, we're not going to do anything. So this is good to go. Then, so this will also only run on the server, because this is called by a server only event. So this will not replicate by default, only if we set a replication over here. And if we don't do it like we are, then it simply also only fires on the server. So we need a second boolean in here that's called isFiring, and we need to make it so we can make burst delays and fire delays actually work properly. So if we don't have two booleans, we will be able to simply spam the button and bypass our fire delays. So we're going to grab a branch, and first of all, we're going to check if we're not already firing. So we're going to plug in this boolean. And if this is false, then we're going to set isFiring to true. So hook up the false pin and set it to true. And again, all of this only runs on the server, so we don't need to worry about replicating these variables because the server is the only one using these variables. Then we want to add a new variable as well, and we're going to be doing that quite a lot. This is going to be the current burst fire count. And this is going to be an integer, and right before we start our fire loop, we're going to set the burst fire count to 0. So simply plug it in over here. That's good to go. Then we need to get our weapon type, and that's an enumeration that we stored on our primary data asset. So we're going to create a new variable again and call this weapon type. Change it to our enum, the weapon type enum. And we want to drag it in over here and then switch on the enumeration. Plug it in. So this will determine if we're firing a trace weapon or a projectile weapon. And for now, we're going to focus on the trace weapons, and we're going to add projectile weapons later. And if we are firing a trace weapon, we want to call a function that we're going to set up a bit later, but let's create it. And this is called fire weapon bullet trace. So fire weapon bullet trace. And then we can go back to the event graph and simply call it over here. So hook it up to the trace pin. We're not going to worry about the projectile pin for now. And we actually want one output on the fire weapon bullet trace. So let's add that one, and that's called weapon fired. And that's a bool, so that's good to go. We're going to use this bool later, but for testing, we actually want to have it disconnected. So we are going to add it in here, but we're not going to hook it up. And after the boolean, we want to add a delay for our fire time. So we're going to add a delay. I'm going to bypass the branch and simply plug it in over here. Let's add a comment, disconnected, really, for testing. Just so we know. And the fire delay, we actually want to make that a variable. So let's promote to variable, and this is going to be our fire time. So the time it takes for this weapon to fire one shot. Once we have the fire delay in place, we're going to add a branch, and we're going to check if we are firing a burst weapon or not. And we're going to simply do that by checking the burst count for this weapon. So we're going to create a new variable. Let's call that burst count, and that's an integer. So if this integer is 0, it's not a burst weapon, and if it's higher than 0, then it's a burst weapon that fires that amount of burst. So we're going to check if this is greater than 0, and that's the condition for this branch. So what we want to do first, let's keep it simple. Let's add the false branch first. So from the false branch, if it's not a burst weapon, we're going to add a second check. So hook up another branch over here. And we want to check if we are still firing. So if we quote unquote have the fire button pressed. And we also want to know if this weapon is an auto fire weapon. So we're going to add a boolean. And we're going to create another variable, and that's called isAutoFire. Turn that one into a bool, and that's our second condition over here. Plug it in. So if both of these are true, we want to continue the fire loop. So we're simply going to loop back to the beginning, to the switch node for the enumeration. So let's grab the true pin and hook it up to the switch on weapon types enum. And let's make it look a little bit cleaner. Something like this. And if this is false, then we're simply going to set our bools back to false as well. So first of all, we're going to set fire weapon back to false, but we're also going to set is firing back to false to indicate that the actual loop over here ended as well, and we have the fire time delay completed. So that's good to go. And then do the branch for our burst weapon. So over here we need a second variable, and that's our current burst. Oh, sorry, no, we already have that. The current burst fire count, we're going to drag it in, and we're simply going to increment it. So add 1 to it, and then save it again. So that's just a little macro. And after we increased it, we're going to check if it's at a maximum or not. So we're going to add a branch again. And let's move this out of the way a little bit. And we want to check if our current burst fire count is still less than our burst count. So grab the burst fire count, do less than, and then grab the burst count of the weapon. So this is the variable that comes from the primary data asset. We're not going to change this variable. We're simply using it to compare, and this is the one we're increasing. So if this is true, then we also want to keep firing. So we're going to simply hook it up over here. The true pin goes back to the switch on enum. And if this is false, then we completed one burst. So what we want to do then is grab the current burst fire count and set that one to 0. And we also want to wait for our burst delay. So we need a second delay variable for that. We're going to add a delay node in here. Promote this to a variable as well. And that's our burst delay. And after the delay is completed, we want to hook up the branch over here to check if we still want to continue firing. So we're going to plug it in over here. And then let's clean it up a little bit so it looks a little bit neater. Like so. And then this one like so. There we go. So this should work. We have the burst fire count, so we have bursting set up, and we're going to set up the shotgun inside of the bullet trace function. So we don't need to worry about shotguns in here. We are going to expand on this a little bit later, but this is actually the biggest part of the fire weapon that we need. So we can take a look at the bullet trace function next. So we're actually gonna wait with the bullet tracing till the next episode. It makes a little bit more sense. Then we're gonna set up the bullet trace function, add a new trace channel, and do all of that stuff at once. And we're already closing into over half an hour, so this seems like a good cutoff point for this episode. I realized this was a little bit boring, and we're gonna get to the exciting part in the next episode. So thanks for watching, everybody. Talk to you later. Bye bye.